I remember the taste, bitter, metallic, wrong. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, the kind we used to have before everything changed. My son sat across from me, his eyes glued to his phone, while my daughter-in-law, Anna, smiled too sweetly as she poured the tea. I lifted my cup, feeling the weight of her gaze, and took a sip. The world spun, my heart hammered in my chest, and suddenly the room tilted. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. My hands trembled, the cup slipping from my grasp and shattering on the floor. Anna's gasp sliced through the chaos, sharp and high-pitched. "Oh my God! What's happening to her?" she cried, but her eyes flickered with something I couldn't name. Fear, guilt, or maybe something darker. My son rushed to my side, his face pale, but I could barely see him through the haze. My body felt heavy, my mind swimming in confusion and terror. Was this a heart attack, a stroke, or something far more sinister? As I slipped in and out of consciousness, I heard whispers, frantic, desperate, secrets tumbling out in the panic. Someone had tried to poison me. But who and why? The answer, I would soon learn, was more twisted than I could ever have imagined. What happened next would tear my family apart, expose hidden betrayals, and force me to confront truths I'd spent a lifetime avoiding. If you think you know how this story ends, you're wrong. Because what happened after that night, no one could have predicted. My name is Margaret, though most people just call me Maggie. I've lived in the same sunlit house for nearly 30 years, a modest, two-story home with creaky floorboards, a garden that blooms wild every spring, and a kitchen that always smells faintly of cinnamon and coffee. It's the kind of place where memories linger in every corner, where laughter and tears have soaked into the walls. I raised my son, Daniel, here after my husband passed away far too young. We weathered storms together, just the two of us, and I always believed that love and loyalty would be enough to keep us close. Daniel was my miracle, my reason for getting up every morning when grief threatened to swallow me whole. He was a quiet, thoughtful boy, always more comfortable with books than with crowds. And as he grew into a man, I watched him become someone I admired, steady, kind, and fiercely loyal. When he brought Anna home for the first time, I was nervous, of course. Every mother is, I suppose, but I wanted to welcome her, to make her feel like she belonged. I baked her favorite lemon cake, set the table with my best china, and tried to ignore the way her eyes darted around the room, as if she were searching for something to criticize. Anna was beautiful, with sharp cheekbones and a smile that could light up a room when she wanted it to. She was clever, too, and ambitious in a way I'd never been. I admired that about her, even if it sometimes made me feel old-fashioned. I tried in those early days to bridge the gap between us. I invited her to help me in the garden, to share recipes, to join me for long walks in the park. Sometimes she accepted, but more often she declined, her excuses polite but distant. I told myself it was just nerves, that she'd warm up in time. Still, there were moments, small, fleeting, when I caught a glimpse of something colder beneath her surface. A tightness in her smile when Daniel complimented my cooking, a sigh when I offered advice, a look that lingered a little too long on the family photos lining the hallway. I brushed it off, determined not to let suspicion take root. After all, families are built on trust, aren't they? I wanted so badly for us to be a family, to share Sunday dinners and holiday traditions, to watch Daniel and Anna build a life together under this roof. Our home became theirs after the wedding, and I did my best to step back, to give them space while still being present. I cooked for them, cleaned, and tended the garden, hoping my efforts would be appreciated. Daniel always thanked me, his hugs warm and genuine, but Anna's gratitude felt forced, her words clipped and formal. I tried not to take it personally. I reminded myself that blending families is never easy, that patience and kindness would win her over eventually. But as the months passed, I began to notice changes. Anna started rearranging the house, moving my things without asking, replacing my curtains with sleek, modern ones that made the rooms feel colder. She insisted on handling the finances, saying it was more efficient, and Daniel, ever trusting, agreed. I felt myself becoming a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around their routines, careful not to intrude. The warmth I'd worked so hard to create seemed to slip through my fingers, replaced by a chill I couldn't quite explain. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself that every family has growing pains, that love would smooth the rough edges. I tried to ignore the way Anna's laughter sometimes sounded like mockery, or the way she rolled her eyes when Daniel hugged me. I focused on the good moments, the rare evenings when we all sat together, sharing stories and memories, the times when Daniel squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Those moments were my anchor. The proof that I still mattered, that I still belonged. I wanted so desperately to believe that we could be happy, that the cracks I saw were just shadows, not signs of something deeper. But even as I tried to convince myself, a quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered that something was wrong. I pushed it aside, determined to hold my family together, no matter what it took. I had no idea then just how much that determination would be tested, or how close I was to losing everything I'd ever loved. It happened gradually, like a slow leak in a roof you don't notice until the ceiling caves in. At first, Anna's distance was just that, distance. She was busy, she said, with work and friends and her own family. I tried to understand, to give her space, but the space between us only seemed to grow. I found myself left out of conversations, my suggestions brushed aside with a tight smile or a dismissive wave of her hand. Daniel, caught in the middle, seemed oblivious, always eager to keep the peace, always quick to assure me that everything was fine, but everything was not fine. I began to notice that I was no longer included in the little things that once made our family feel whole. Anna started planning dinners and outings without me, whispering with Daniel in the kitchen, their voices dropping to a hush when I entered the room. Invitations to family gatherings, birthdays, anniversaries, even simple Sunday brunches, stopped arriving. When I asked Daniel about it, he looked confused, promised it was just an oversight, but the pattern continued. I watched from the window as they left for a weekend trip, Anna's laughter echoing down the driveway, Daniel's arm around her shoulders. I stood there, clutching a casserole I'd made for the road, feeling foolish and invisible. The real turning point came one rainy afternoon, the kind of day that makes the house feel smaller and the silence heavier. I was in the kitchen, preparing tea, when I overheard Anna on the phone. Her voice was sharp, her words clipped. "She's always here hovering. I can't breathe in my own home. Daniel won't do anything about it. I wish she'd just go away." The words stung, each one a tiny cut. I stood frozen, the teapot trembling in my hands, unsure whether to confront her or pretend I hadn't heard. Later that evening, as we sat at the dinner table, Anna's hostility became impossible to ignore. She criticized the meal I'd prepared, pushing her plate away with a sigh. "You know, Maggie, not everyone likes old-fashioned food. Maybe it's time to try something new." Daniel shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I forced a smile, swallowing the hurt, but inside, something shifted. I realized I was no longer welcome in my own kitchen, my own home. The next morning, I found my favorite mug, the one Daniel had given me for Mother's Day years ago, shattered in the trash. No one said a word about it. When I asked Anna if she'd seen it, she shrugged. "Maybe it's time to let go of some things," she said, her eyes cold. It was such a small thing, a mug, but it felt like a message. I was being erased, piece by piece, from the life I'd built. I tried to talk to Daniel, to tell him how I felt, but he brushed me off, distracted by work and Anna's needs. "She's just stressed, Mom. Give her time." But time only made things worse. Anna began locking the door to the study, insisting on privacy, moving my belongings into boxes without asking. She changed the Wi-Fi password, stopped including me in household decisions, and started making plans for renovations, plans I was never consulted about. The final blow came at a family gathering I hadn't even known was happening. I saw photos on social media, Daniel and Anna surrounded by friends and relatives, smiling for the camera. My absence was glaring, a silent confirmation that I was no longer part of their world. When I confronted Anna, she didn't bother to hide her disdain. "You make things uncomfortable, Maggie. Maybe it's better if you keep to yourself." That night, I sat alone in my room, the walls closing in, the house that once felt so full of life now echoing with emptiness. I realized with a cold clarity that I was being pushed out, not with words, but with actions, with silence, with 1,000 tiny cuts. The woman I had tried so hard to welcome into my family had become a stranger, and my son, my sweet Daniel, was slipping away from me one day at a time. I didn't know what to do or how to fight back. All I knew was that something precious was being stolen from me, and I was powerless to stop it. It's strange how quickly you can go from feeling at home to feeling like a stranger in your own life. After that family gathering I wasn't invited to, I started to notice things, little things at first, that I tried to explain away. But the more I tried to ignore them, the more they seemed to multiply, like shadows growing longer as the sun sets. It began with my jewelry. I've never been one for extravagance, but I have a few pieces that mean the world to me. My mother's locket, a silver bracelet Daniel made for me in school, my wedding ring. One morning, I opened my jewelry box and found the locket missing. I searched everywhere, turning out drawers and pockets, but it was gone. When I asked Anna if she'd seen it, she barely looked up from her phone. "Maybe you misplaced it. You're always forgetting things lately." Her words stung, but I tried to believe her. Maybe I was getting forgetful. Maybe I was making a fuss over nothing. But then it was the food. I've always prided myself on my cooking, and I know the taste of my own recipes. Lately, though, things tasted off. The tea was bitter, the soup metallic, the bread dry and strange. I started to feel queasy after meals, my stomach twisting in knots. I mentioned it to Daniel, but he just laughed. "You're probably just stressed, Mom. Anna's been helping out in the kitchen. Maybe she's experimenting with new spices." I wanted to believe him, but the unease lingered. The house itself felt different, too. I'd walk into a room and find Anna quickly ending a phone call, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'd hear my name spoken in hushed tones, followed by silence when I entered. Once I caught her in the study, rifling through my papers. She looked up, startled, and snapped, "I was just looking for a pen. You really should organize your things better." I tried to laugh it off, but my heart pounded in my chest. I started to keep a notebook, jotting down every odd occurrence. The missing locket, the strange taste in my tea, the way Anna would watch me, her eyes cold and calculating when she thought I wasn't looking. I wrote down the dates, the times, the details, hoping to make sense of it all. But the more I wrote, the more paranoid I felt. Was I imagining things? Was I losing my mind? One evening, I overheard Anna and Daniel arguing in the hallway. Their voices were low, urgent. "She's always in the way," Anna hissed. "I can't live like this, Daniel. Something has to change." Daniel's reply was muffled, but I caught the words patience and family. I pressed my ear to the door, my heart racing, but the conversation ended abruptly when Anna noticed me standing there. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Can I help you with something, Maggie?" she asked, her tone syrupy sweet. I started to feel unsafe in my own home. I double-checked the locks at night, kept my bedroom door closed, and hid my valuables in places only I would think to look. I stopped eating anything Anna prepared, making excuses about my diet or my health. I watched her closely, looking for signs, for proof that my suspicions weren't just the product of an overactive imagination. But Daniel refused to see it. Whenever I tried to talk to him, he brushed me off. "You're being paranoid, Mom. Anna's trying her best. Maybe you just need to relax." His words hurt more than Anna's coldness. He was my son, my anchor, and now he was slipping away, siding with her, blind to the changes in our home. The tension grew with each passing day. Anna's hostility became more open, snide remarks at dinner, rolling her eyes when I spoke, moving my things without asking. She started locking the pantry, claiming it was for organization, and insisted on handling all the groceries. I found myself tiptoeing around the house, afraid to set her off, afraid to make things worse. One night I woke to the sound of voices in the kitchen. I crept down the stairs and saw Anna pouring something from a small bottle into a cup. She glanced over her shoulder, then quickly hid the bottle in her purse. My blood ran cold. I wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation, but fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if Daniel didn't believe me? I went back to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, replaying every moment, every word, every look. Was Anna trying to hurt me? Was I in danger? Or was I just a lonely old woman, desperate for attention, seeing threats where there were none? The next morning, I found my notebook missing. I searched everywhere, but it was gone. When I asked Anna, she shrugged. "Maybe you misplaced it. You really should take better care of your things." Her words echoed in my mind, a cruel refrain. I felt trapped, isolated, and powerless. The home I'd built, the family I'd cherished, was slipping through my fingers. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight back, but I didn't know how. All I knew was that something was terribly wrong, and I was the only one who seemed to see it. The fear grew inside me, a dark, gnawing presence that wouldn't let me rest. I was losing everything, my son, my home, my sense of safety, and I didn't know how to stop it. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Something had to change before it was too late. There are moments, late at night when the house is silent, and the only sound is the ticking of the old clock in the hallway, when I wonder if I am the problem. I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every sideways glance, every moment Anna has made me feel small. I ask myself if I am imagining things, if I am simply an old woman clinging to the past, unable to accept change. The doubt creeps in, slow and relentless, until it feels like a weight pressing down on my chest. I remember when this house was filled with laughter. I see Daniel as a little boy, running through the kitchen with flour on his cheeks, giggling as I chased him with a wooden spoon. I remember birthday parties with balloons tied to the banister, the smell of chocolate cake in the oven, the sound of children's voices echoing through the rooms. I remember Christmas mornings, Daniel's eyes wide with wonder as he tore open his presents, my husband's arm around my shoulders, the three of us huddled together in our pajamas. Those memories feel like another life, a world that has slipped through my fingers. Now, the house feels cold and empty. The rooms that once held so much joy are filled with tension and silence. I walk through the halls and see only shadows of what used to be. The kitchen, once the heart of our home, is now a battleground. I am careful with every word, every gesture, afraid of setting Anna off, afraid of making things worse. I miss the days when I could simply be myself, when I didn't have to tiptoe around my own life. Sometimes I catch myself talking to my husband, his photo propped up on my nightstand. I tell him about my fears, my loneliness, my confusion. I ask him what I should do, how I should fight for our family. I imagine his voice, gentle and reassuring, telling me to trust my instincts, to hold on to what matters. But the truth is, I feel more alone than I ever have before. I think about Daniel, about the boy he was, and the man he has become. I wonder if I failed him somehow, if I made him too dependent on me, or not dependent enough. I wonder if I am losing him because I held on too tightly, or because I let go too soon. I see the way he looks at Anna, the way he defends her, and I feel a pang of jealousy, of grief for the closeness we once shared. I want to believe that he still loves me, that he still needs me, but I can't help but feel like an outsider in his life. The confusion is the worst part. I question everything, my memory, my judgment, my sanity. I wonder if Anna is right, if I am forgetful, if I am making things up. I search for proof, for something solid to hold on to, but all I find are fragments, missing jewelry, strange tastes, whispered conversations. I write them down, trying to make sense of it all, but the more I try to understand, the more lost I feel. I remember the first time Anna smiled at me, really smiled, and I thought we might become friends. I remember the way she laughed at my stories, the way she thanked me for welcoming her into our family. I wonder what changed, what I did to make her turn against me. I replay every moment, searching for the mistake, the wrong word, the gesture that pushed her away. I want to fix it, to make things right, but I don't know how. There are days when I feel invisible, like a ghost haunting my own home. I watch Daniel and Anna from a distance, their lives unfolding without me. I hear their laughter, their plans, their dreams, and I feel like I am fading away. I try to remind myself of who I am, of the life I have built, but the doubt is always there, whispering that I am no longer needed, no longer wanted. And yet, beneath the confusion and the heartbreak, there is a flicker of anger, of determination. I have survived loss before. I have rebuilt my life from the ashes. I remind myself that I am not weak, that I am not crazy. I hold on to the memories of happier times, to the love that once filled this house, and I tell myself that I will not let it be taken from me. I will not let Anna erase me no matter how hard she tries. Still, The loneliness is overwhelming. I miss my friends, my family, the sense of belonging I once had. I miss the feeling of being seen, of being valued. I wonder if I will ever find my way back to that place, or if I am destined to wander these halls alone, a stranger in my own life. I close my eyes and pray for strength, for clarity, for a sign that I am not alone in this darkness. I promise myself that I will keep fighting, that I will not give up, no matter how lost I feel. Because somewhere deep down, I still believe that the truth will come to light, and that I will find my way home again. It's remarkable how quickly a home can turn into a place of quiet warfare. Anna's hostility, once subtle and easy to dismiss, became impossible to ignore. It started with the meals. One evening, I came down to the kitchen to find Anna already plating dinner. She set 2 dishes at the table for herself and Daniel, then turned to me with a tight smile. "I made you something different, Maggie. I know your stomach's been sensitive lately." She handed me a bowl of bland, watery soup, while she and Daniel enjoyed roast chicken and vegetables. I tried to protest, but Daniel just nodded. "Anna's right, Mom. You've been saying you don't feel well. Maybe this will help." I forced a smile, but inside, I felt a chill. I hadn't said anything about my stomach, not to Anna. Was she listening to my phone calls? Or was this just another way to push me aside? The pattern continued. Anna began preparing my meals separately, always with a reason. Too spicy, too rich, too much salt. She started labeling containers in the fridge, marking some with my name and others with hers and Daniel's. I noticed that my food often tasted strange, metallic, or bitter. I stopped eating leftovers, started making my own tea, but Anna always seemed to find a way to control what I consumed. I began to lose weight, my clothes hanging looser, my energy fading. Daniel noticed, but Anna was quick to reassure him. "She's just getting older, Daniel. It happens." He nodded, concern flickering in his eyes, but he never questioned her. Anna's words grew sharper, her tone more cutting. She made veiled threats, always with a smile. "You know, Maggie, it's so important to keep your affairs in order at your age. You never know what could happen." Or, "I read an article about how quickly people can go downhill when they're not careful." It's sad, really. She'd say these things while pouring my tea or setting my plate in front of me, her eyes never leaving mine. I tried to laugh it off, but the fear gnawed at me. She began to manipulate Daniel more openly, too. I'd hear her whispering to him late at night, their voices drifting through the thin walls. The next morning, Daniel would be distant, distracted, quick to defend Anna if I so much as questioned a decision. "Anna's just trying to help, Mom. You need to let her take care of things." I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see what was happening. But every time I tried, he pulled further away. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home. Anna changed the locks on the study, claiming she needed privacy for her work. She moved my belongings into the guest room, saying it would be more comfortable for me. She took over the finances, insisting it was too much for me to handle. I found myself locked out of my own bank account, my name removed from bills and documents. When I confronted Daniel, he just shrugged. "Anna's better with numbers, Mom. You should be grateful she's willing to help." Desperate for support, I reached out to my friends. I called Linda, my oldest friend, and tried to explain what was happening. "Maybe you're just reading too much into things, Maggie," she said gently. "Anna's young. She probably just has a different way of doing things. Try to be patient." I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, but she was busy with her grandchildren. "I'm sure it's just a phase," she said. "Families go through rough patches." I even tried to talk to the pastor at church, but he smiled kindly and told me to pray for patience and understanding. Each conversation left me feeling more isolated, more invisible. I started to doubt myself again. Was I really imagining things? Was I just an old woman, jealous of her son's new life? But then Anna would say something, do something, and the fear would return, sharp and undeniable. One afternoon, I found Anna in my room, going through my drawers. "I was just looking for some extra blankets," she said, her tone icy. "You really should keep things more organized." I wanted to scream, to demand she leave my things alone, but the words caught in my throat. I felt powerless, a guest in my own life. The house itself seemed to turn against me. The thermostat was always set too low, the lights dimmed, the curtains drawn. Anna said it was to save money, but I knew it was another way to make me uncomfortable. I started spending more time outside, sitting on the porch, watching the world go by. But even there, I felt watched, exposed. Anna began to spread rumors about me, too. I overheard her on the phone with her mother, saying I was forgetful, that I'd left the stove on, that I was becoming a danger to myself. She told Daniel I was losing things, that I was confused, that I needed help. I tried to defend myself, but every protest sounded like paranoia. The final straw came when I found my medication tampered with. The pills looked different, the labels smudged. I confronted Anna, but she just smiled. "You must be confused, Maggie. Maybe you should write things down so you don't forget." I felt a surge of anger, but also fear. What if she was right? What if I was losing my mind? I started keeping a journal, hiding it in the lining of my coat. I wrote down everything, every strange taste, every missing item, every cruel word. It was the only thing that kept me grounded, the only proof that I wasn't imagining things. But even as I tried to hold on, I felt myself slipping. The isolation was suffocating, the loneliness overwhelming. I missed Daniel, missed the way things used to be. I wanted to believe that he would see the truth, that he would protect me, but with each passing day, he seemed further away. I realized with a sinking heart that I was truly alone. Anna had succeeded in cutting me off from everyone I loved, from everything that made me feel safe. I was trapped, powerless, and afraid. But somewhere deep inside, a spark of determination remained. I would not let her win. I would find a way to fight back, no matter how impossible it seemed. I owed it to myself, to the woman I used to be, to the family I had built with my own 2 hands. I would not go quietly. Not yet. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that drags on with gray skies and a restless wind rattling the windows. I was alone in the house. Anna had taken Daniel out for dinner, claiming they needed quality time. I wandered the rooms, feeling the emptiness settle around me like a heavy blanket. I tried to distract myself with chores, folding laundry, dusting shelves, but my mind kept circling back to the fear that had become my constant companion. I was tired of feeling powerless, tired of doubting my own senses. I needed answers, something solid to hold on to. As I put away towels in the upstairs bathroom, I noticed the cabinet under the sink was slightly ajar. Anna was always meticulous, always closing things with a snap, so the gap caught my eye. I knelt down, my knees aching, and opened the door wider. At first I saw only the usual clutter, cleaning supplies, extra soap, a box of tissues. But tucked behind a stack of old washcloths was a small, dark bottle. My heart thudded in my chest as I reached for it, my hands trembling. The label was faded, but I could make out the word toxic in bold red letters. My breath caught. I turned the bottle over, reading the fine print, rat poison. My mind raced. Why would Anna need rat poison? We'd never had a problem with pests, and she'd never mentioned it. I unscrewed the cap and sniffed cautiously. The sharp chemical scent made my eyes water. I set the bottle down, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the sink to steady myself. 1,000 memories flashed through my mind. The bitter taste in my tea, the strange aftertaste in my soup, the way Anna always insisted on preparing my meals. I felt sick, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. This was no longer a matter of paranoia or misunderstanding. This was real. My life was in danger. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, the bottle clutched in my hands, and let the truth wash over me. Anna was trying to poison me. The realization was both terrifying and strangely clarifying. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of certainty, a sharpness that cut through the fog of confusion and fear. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I was fighting for my life, but what could I do? If I confronted Anna, she would deny everything, twist my words, make me look unstable. Daniel would believe her. He always did. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that would force them to see the truth. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That I found a bottle of rat poison in my own house? It wasn't enough. I needed more. I remembered the journal I'd been keeping, hidden in the lining of my coat. I retrieved it, flipping through the pages, reading my own desperate handwriting. Every strange taste, every missing item, every cruel word, I had documented it all. It was a start, but I needed something concrete, something that couldn't be explained away. As I sat there, a plan began to form. I would set a trap, gather evidence, and expose Anna for what she was. I would be careful, methodical, just as she had been. I would not let fear control me any longer. I would fight back, not just for myself, but for Daniel, for the family we once were. I wiped my eyes, steeling myself. I would start by switching the cups at dinner, watching closely for any sign of hesitation or guilt. I would hide a camera in the kitchen, record every interaction, every meal Anna prepared. I would keep the bottle of poison hidden, ready to show the authorities if it came to that. I would not confront her until I had everything I needed. The thought of living under the same roof as Anna, knowing what she was capable of, filled me with dread. But I had no choice. I had to be strong, had to outsmart her at her own game. I would not let her win. I would not let her erase me. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, I had a purpose, a plan. I was no longer a victim, no longer a helpless bystander in my own life. I was a mother, a survivor, and I would do whatever it took to protect myself and my son. I listened to the sounds of the house, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant murmur of Anna and Daniel's voices. I knew the road ahead would be dangerous, that I would have to be careful, patient, and brave. But I was ready. I would gather my evidence, set my trap, and wait for the moment when the truth could no longer be denied. As I drifted off to sleep, I clutched the journal to my chest, whispering a silent promise to myself. I will not be erased. I will not be silenced. I will fight, and I will win. I never imagined my own son would look at me with pity, as if I were a burden he could no longer bear. But that's exactly what happened the night Anna found my journal. I'd hidden it so carefully, or so I thought, but she must have been watching me, waiting for the right moment. She stormed into the living room, waving the notebook in the air, her face twisted with triumph. Look at this, Daniel. Your mother's been spying on us, writing down every little thing. She's obsessed. This isn't normal. Daniel took the journal from her, flipping through the pages, his brow furrowing as he read my desperate scrawl. I tried to explain, to make him see that I was only trying to protect myself, but the words caught in my throat. Anna stood behind him, her arms crossed, her eyes cold and victorious. She's not well, Daniel. She's paranoid. She thinks I'm trying to hurt her. This is exactly what I've been telling you. I reached for Daniel's hand, but he pulled away, his expression a mixture of confusion and exhaustion. Mom, why didn't you just talk to me? Why are you writing all this down? Anna's right, you've been acting strange. You're not yourself. His words cut deeper than any knife. I tried to protest, to tell him about the poison, the strange tastes, the missing things, but Anna interrupted, her voice dripping with false concern. Maybe it's time we got her some help. She can't keep living here if she's going to accuse us of these things. It's not safe. The room spun around me. I felt small, powerless, as if the ground had opened up beneath my feet. Daniel and Anna began talking about nursing homes, about professional care, about how it would be better for everyone if I had a place where I could be looked after. I wanted to scream, to beg Daniel to remember who I was, to remember all the years I'd spent loving him, protecting him, building this home for him. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just kept shaking his head, as if he couldn't bear to look at me. That night, I sat alone in my room, the walls closing in, the house that had once been my sanctuary, now a prison. I stared at the empty space on my nightstand where my journal had been, feeling as if a part of me had been ripped away. I thought about my husband, about the life we'd built together, about the little boy who used to run to me for comfort. Where had it all gone wrong? How had I become so utterly alone? For the first time, I let myself consider giving up. Maybe Anna was right. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I was just an old woman, clinging to memories that no longer mattered. The fight had drained me, left me hollow and exhausted. I wondered if it would be easier to let go, to stop struggling, to accept whatever fate Anna and Daniel decided for me. Tears slid down my cheeks as I imagined myself in a nursing home. Surrounded by strangers, my days reduced to a routine of pills and silence. I pictured Daniel visiting out of obligation, Anna never coming at all. I felt the weight of my own insignificance. the crushing realization that I had become invisible in the very place I had once called home. I curled up on my bed, pulling the covers over my head, wishing I could disappear. I thought about all the times I'd fought for my family, all the sacrifices I'd made, and wondered if any of it had ever really mattered. I felt broken, defeated, ready to surrender, but somewhere, deep inside, a tiny ember of resistance remained. Even as I lay there, drowning in despair, I couldn't quite let go of the hope that the truth would come out, that Daniel would remember the mother who had always loved him, that I would find a way to reclaim my life. For now, though, I was lost, adrift in a sea of doubt and heartbreak, unsure if I would ever find my way back. I spent that night in a fog of grief, but as the first light crept through the curtains, something inside me shifted. I had been pushed to the edge, stripped of my dignity, my voice, my place in the world, but I was not ready to surrender. I thought of my mother, a woman who had survived war and loss, who had taught me that even in the darkest moments, you must find a way to stand up for yourself. I wiped my tears and sat up in bed, my mind suddenly clear. If Anna wanted to erase me, she would have to fight harder. I would not go quietly. I would not let her win. I began to plan, careful and methodical, just as Anna had been in her campaign against me. I knew I needed proof, real, undeniable evidence that would force Daniel to see the truth. I remembered the old webcam Daniel had set up years ago to watch the birds in the garden. It was still in the attic, gathering dust. My hands shook as I climbed the stairs, but I found it, tucked away in a box of Christmas decorations. I tested it on my laptop, and to my relief, it still worked. I hid it in the kitchen, behind a row of cookbooks, its tiny lens pointed at the counter where Anna always prepared my meals. The next step was riskier. I needed to create a situation where Anna would reveal herself, where her actions would be caught on camera. I decided to host a family dinner, something I hadn't done in months. I told Anna and Daniel that I wanted to make amends, to start fresh. Anna's eyes narrowed, suspicious, but she agreed. Daniel seemed relieved, eager for any sign of peace. I spent the day preparing, making sure everything was perfect. I set the table with my best china, polished the silverware, and cooked Daniel's favorite meal. Anna insisted on making the tea as always. I watched her closely, my heart pounding as she moved around the kitchen, her movements quick and precise. I saw her glance at the cookbooks, but she didn't notice the camera. She poured 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for herself, then added a splash of milk to mine, just as I liked it. I watched as she reached into her pocket, her hand closing around something small and dark. She glanced over her shoulder, then quickly tipped the contents into my cup, stirring it with a practiced hand. I felt a surge of fear, but also a strange sense of triumph. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I carried the cups to the table, my hands steady. I sat down across from Anna, my eyes never leaving hers. Daniel joined us, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. As we ate, I forced myself to act normal, to smile and make small talk. My heart raced as Anna pushed the cup toward me, her eyes glittering with anticipation. I hesitated, then picked up the cup, pretending to take a sip. Anna watched me, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. I set the cup down, my mind racing. I needed her to drink from her own cup, to prove that she had nothing to hide. I looked at Anna and said, "You know, I think I put too much sugar in mine. Would you mind switching with me?" She froze just for a moment, then forced a laugh. "Of course, Maggie, if you insist." She reached for my cup, her hand trembling ever so slightly. I watched as she lifted it to her lips, her eyes never leaving mine. She took a sip, then set the cup down, her smile faltering. Within minutes, Anna's face paled. She pressed a hand to her stomach, her eyes wide with panic. Daniel jumped up, alarmed. "Anna, what's wrong?" She tried to speak, but her words were slurred, her body shaking. I stood up, my own fear forgotten, and called for an ambulance. As we waited, I retrieved the camera from the kitchen, clutching it to my chest like a lifeline. The paramedics arrived quickly, whisking Anna away. Daniel was frantic, demanding to know what had happened. I handed him the camera, my voice steady. "Watch this, Daniel, please, just watch." He stared at me, confused, but did as I asked. As the footage played, his face changed, confusion giving way to horror, then disbelief. He looked at me, tears in his eyes. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't want to believe." I hugged him, my own tears finally falling. "I know, Daniel. I know." The truth was out, undeniable and clear. I had risked everything, but I had finally found a way to make my voice heard. I had fought back, not just for myself, but for the family I still hoped to save. And as I held my son, I knew that whatever happened next, I had reclaimed a piece of myself that Anna could never take away. The night of the dinner arrived with a heaviness in the air, as if the house itself sensed what was about to unfold. I moved through the rooms with a strange calm, every detail etched into my memory. The gleam of the polished silverware, the soft glow of the candles, the scent of rosemary and garlic drifting from the oven. I had spent the day preparing not just the meal, but myself. I wore my favorite blue dress, the one Daniel had always said brought out my eyes, and I pinned my mother's locket at my throat, a silent reminder of the strength I came from. I was determined to face whatever happened with dignity, no matter how much my hands trembled beneath the table. Anna arrived in the kitchen just as I was setting out the plates. She was dressed impeccably, her hair swept up, her lips painted a deep red. She smiled at me, but there was no warmth in it. "Let me make the tea, Maggie," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "You've done enough." I nodded, stepping aside, my heart pounding as I watched her move. She reached into her purse, her back to me, and I saw the quick, practiced motion as she slipped something into one of the cups. My breath caught, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times. Tonight, I would not falter. Daniel joined us, his face bright with hope, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. "This looks wonderful, Mom," he said, hugging me. I clung to him for a moment, wishing I could freeze time, wishing things could go back to the way they were. But there was no turning back now. We sat at the table, the three of us, the air thick with unspoken words. Anna poured the tea, her hands steady, her eyes flickering to mine. She set a cup in front of me, then one for herself, and finally one for Daniel. I watched her closely, every muscle in my body taut with anticipation. I waited until she was distracted, then, with a quick, practiced motion, I switched our cups. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my face neutral, my voice steady as I thanked her. Dinner passed in a blur. I barely tasted the food, my mind racing with fear and hope. Anna watched me, her gaze sharp, waiting for something to happen. I forced myself to eat, to smile, to play the part of the gracious hostess. Daniel chatted about work, about a new project he was excited about. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he glanced between us, sensing that something was off. Finally, Anna lifted her cup, her eyes locked on mine. "To new beginnings," she said, raising it in a toast. I raised mine as well, my hand steady, my voice clear. "To truth," I replied. She smiled, a flash of triumph in her eyes, and took a long sip. It happened quickly. Anna set her cup down, her face suddenly pale. She pressed a hand to her stomach, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. I don't feel well," she stammered, her voice trembling. Daniel jumped up, concern etched on his face. "Anna, what's wrong?" She tried to stand, but her legs buckled, and she collapsed back into her chair, gasping for breath. Panic erupted. Daniel rushed to her side, his hands shaking as he tried to help her. I stood frozen, my own fear warring with a grim sense of vindication. Anna's eyes darted to me, wild and accusing. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I shook my head, my own voice trembling. "I didn't do anything, Anna. You made the tea." Daniel looked between us, confusion and horror dawning on his face. "What's going on? Someone tell me what's happening." Anna tried to speak, but her words were slurred, her body shaking uncontrollably. I grabbed the phone and called for an ambulance, my hands steady even as my heart pounded in my chest. As we waited, I retrieved the hidden camera from the kitchen, my lifeline, my proof. I handed it to Daniel, my voice calm but urgent. "Watch this, Daniel. Please, you need to see the truth." He stared at me, then at Anna, then back at the camera. He played the footage, his face draining of color as he watched Anna slip the poison into my cup, watched me switch the cups at the last moment. The truth hung in the air, undeniable and devastating. Anna's mask crumbled, her composure shattered. She sobbed, pleading with Daniel, insisting it was all a mistake, that she hadn't meant to hurt anyone. But the evidence was there, clear and damning. Daniel's face twisted with grief and disbelief. "Why, Anna? Why would you do this?" he choked out, his voice breaking. Anna's words tumbled out in a torrent of bitterness and resentment. "You never saw me, Daniel. You were always so close to her, always putting her first. I was tired of living in her shadow, tired of feeling like I didn't belong. I just wanted her gone. I just wanted a life of my own." Her confession hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. The paramedics arrived, rushing Anna to the hospital. Daniel and I stood in the doorway, watching the ambulance lights fade into the night. He turned to me, his eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have believed you." I hugged him, holding him close, feeling the weight of months of fear and pain begin to lift. The house was silent after they left, the chaos giving way to a strange, fragile peace. I sat at the table staring at the empty cups, the remnants of a battle finally won. I felt a surge of relief, but also a deep, aching sadness for all that had been lost. My family would never be the same, but the truth had finally come to light. Daniel returned from the hospital hours later, exhausted and shaken. He sat beside me, his head in his hands. "She'll recover," he said quietly. "But she'll have to answer for what she's done." I nodded, my own heart heavy with the knowledge that healing would take time, that trust, once broken, is not easily mended. But as the dawn crept over the horizon, I felt a sense of hope. I had faced the darkness and survived. I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, my place in the world. And as I looked at Daniel, I knew that, whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger for having faced the truth. The days that followed felt like moving through a dream, one of those strange, heavy dreams where nothing is quite real and every sound echoes. The house was quiet, almost eerily so, with Anna gone and Daniel moving through the rooms like a ghost. I found myself listening for her footsteps, half expecting her sharp voice to cut through the silence, but all I heard was the ticking of the clock and the distant hum of traffic outside. The chaos of that night replayed in my mind over and over, each detail sharper than the last. Anna's trembling hands, Daniel's horrified face, the cold certainty that I had been right all along. Anna remained in the hospital for several days, recovering under the watchful eyes of doctors and, eventually, the police. There was no hiding what she had done. The footage from the camera, the bottle of poison, her own desperate confession, there was no way to twist the truth anymore. Daniel spent hours at the hospital, torn between anger and heartbreak, trying to make sense of the woman he thought he knew. I watched him struggle, wanting to comfort him, but knowing that some wounds could not be soothed with a mother's touch. For the first time in months, I felt safe in my own home. I could walk into the kitchen without fear, make myself a cup of tea without second-guessing every taste. But the relief was bittersweet. I had won, yes, but at a cost I never wanted to pay. My family was broken, the trust between us shattered. I saw the pain in Daniel's eyes, the way he avoided looking at me, as if he was ashamed of how easily he had been deceived. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that love can blind us all, but I knew he needed time to find his own forgiveness. Neighbors and friends reached out as the truth spread, their voices full of shock and sympathy. Some apologized for not believing me, for brushing off my concerns as the worries of an aging woman. I accepted their words with grace, but inside, I felt a quiet anger at how easily I had been dismissed. I promised myself I would never again let anyone silence my voice, no matter how alone I felt. In the quiet moments, I reflected on everything that had happened. I thought about the years I had spent building this family, the sacrifices I had made, the love I had poured into every corner of this house. I realized that for too long, I had measured my worth by the happiness of others, by my ability to keep the peace, to hold everyone together. But peace built on silence and fear is no peace at all. I had learned, painfully, that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to speak the truth, even when your voice shakes. Daniel and I talked late into the night, both of us raw and honest in a way we hadn't been in years. He apologized again and again, tears streaming down his face, and I held him, letting him grieve not just for Anna, but for the innocence we had both lost. "I should have listened, Mom," he whispered. "I should have trusted you." I stroked his hair, remembering the little boy he once was, and told him that forgiveness was not just for Anna, but for ourselves as well. The house began to feel like mine again, slowly, day by day. I opened the curtains, let the sunlight in, filled the rooms with fresh flowers. I cooked meals for myself, savoring the simple pleasure of eating without fear. I called old friends, invited them over for tea, and found comfort in their company. I even joined a book club at the library, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. But the greatest lesson I learned was this: I am stronger than I ever knew. I survived betrayal, isolation, and fear, and I came out the other side, not just alive, but whole. I learned to trust myself, to listen to my instincts, to fight for my own happiness. I learned that love is not about sacrificing yourself for others, but about standing up for what is right, even when it's hard. As I watched Daniel begin to heal, to find his footing again, I felt a sense of hope for the future. Our family would never be the same, but we would rebuild, piece by piece, with honesty and love as our foundation. And as I sat in the garden one afternoon, the sun warm on my face, I realized that I was not just a survivor. I was a woman who had reclaimed her life, her voice, and her place in the world. In the weeks that followed, I found myself waking up with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. The shadows that had haunted every corner of my home began to recede, replaced by sunlight and the gentle hum of possibility. For so long I had lived in fear of being unwanted, unheard, unseen. Now, with the truth out and Anna gone, I realized I had been given a second chance, not just to survive, but to truly live. I started with small things. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, moving my favorite armchair to the window where the morning sun poured in. I filled the house with fresh flowers from the garden, their colors bright and defiant against the memory of darkness. I opened the windows wide, letting in the crisp air and the sound of birdsong. Each act, no matter how simple, felt like a declaration. I am here. This is my home. I reached out to old friends, some of whom I hadn't seen in years. I called Linda and invited her for tea, and we sat at the kitchen table for hours, laughing and sharing stories, the years melting away. I joined a knitting group at the community center, my hands busy with yarn and needles as I listened to the gentle chatter of women who, like me, had weathered storms and come out stronger. I even signed up for a watercolor class at the library, something I'd always wanted to try but never dared. The first time I dipped my brush into the paint, I felt a thrill of joy, as if I were rediscovering a part of myself I'd long forgotten. With each passing day, my confidence grew. I stopped second-guessing myself, stopped apologizing for taking up space. I learned to trust my instincts again, to listen to the quiet voice inside that had been drowned out by fear and doubt. I realized that I was not defined by my age or by the roles I had played as wife and mother, but by the strength and resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. Daniel and I began to rebuild our relationship, slowly and carefully. He visited often, sometimes bringing flowers or a favorite book, sometimes just sitting with me in comfortable silence. We talked openly about the past, about the mistakes we had made and the lessons we had learned. There were tears, of course, but there was laughter too, a reminder that love, once fractured, could be mended with patience and honesty. I saw in him the boy I had raised, but also a man who had learned to see me not just as his mother, but as a person in my own right. I found new purpose in helping others. I volunteered at the local food bank, sorting donations and chatting with people who, like me, had faced hardship and come out the other side. I shared my story with a support group for women who had experienced betrayal and loss, offering a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. Each time I spoke, I felt the weight of my own pain lessen, replaced by a sense of connection and hope. I embraced my independence, relishing the freedom to make my own choices, to fill my days with things that brought me joy. I traveled to the coast with Linda, walking along the shore and letting the wind tangle my hair. I spent lazy afternoons in the garden, my hands deep in the earth, planting seeds for the future. I read novels late into the night, savoring the quiet and the peace that came with knowing I was safe. that I was enough. Most of all, I learned to love myself again. I forgave myself for the years I had spent doubting, for the times I had been too afraid to speak. I celebrated the woman I had become, strong, wise, and unafraid to claim her place in the world. I looked in the mirror and saw not just the lines of age, but the map of a life well lived, a testament to survival and growth. As the seasons changed and the garden bloomed anew, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey I had taken. I knew there would still be hard days, moments of loneliness or regret, but I also knew that I had the strength to face them. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by what I had chosen to do in response. I was empowered, alive, and ready for whatever came next. It was Linda who first suggested I join the online forum. "There are so many women out there who've been through things like this, Maggie," she said, squeezing my hand. "You don't have to carry it alone." At first, I hesitated. I'd always been private, the sort to keep my troubles close. But something in me was ready to reach out, to see if there really were others who understood. I created an account one evening, my heart fluttering as I typed out my story. I didn't use real names, but I poured my heart into every word, how I'd felt invisible, how I'd doubted myself, how I'd fought to reclaim my life. I hit post and waited, unsure if anyone would care, but the responses came quickly. Messages of support, stories that echoed my own, women from all over the world reaching out to say, "Me too." Reading their words, I felt a sense of kinship I hadn't known I was missing. We shared advice, comfort, and sometimes just a listening ear. I found myself checking the forum every morning, eager to see how others were doing, offering encouragement when someone had a hard day, celebrating small victories together. It was a lifeline, a reminder that I was not alone, that my pain and my healing were part of something larger. I started attending a local support group as well, sitting in a circle of women whose faces reflected the same mix of sorrow and strength I saw in my own. We shared coffee, laughter, and sometimes tears. I told my story, and as I spoke, I saw heads nodding, hands reaching out. I realized that by sharing my journey, I was helping others find their own courage. In giving support, I found healing. I helped organize events, brought in guest speakers, and even led a workshop on self-advocacy. The group became a second family, a place where I belonged not because of what I'd lost, but because of what I'd survived. Together, we learned to trust again, to hope again, to believe that life could be beautiful after betrayal. Through community, I found strength. Through helping others, I found purpose. And in the shared stories of resilience, I discovered that even the deepest wounds could become the roots of something new and strong. Looking back, I see now that my story is not just about betrayal or survival. It's about rediscovering my own worth, even when others tried to take it from me. I learned that resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, one hard day at a time, by refusing to let darkness define you. I am not the same woman I was before all of this began. I am stronger, wiser, and more compassionate, not just toward others, but toward myself. If you're listening to my story and you see yourself in these words, please know you are not alone. No matter how isolated you feel, no matter how many times you've been dismissed or doubted, your voice matters. Your truth matters. You have the right to stand up for yourself, to seek help, and to reclaim your life. There is no shame in asking for support, and there is no weakness in feeling pain. What matters is that you keep going, even when it feels impossible. I invite you to share your own story in the comments below. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Have you faced betrayal from someone you trusted? Your experiences can help others feel seen and understood, just as this community has helped me. Let's support each other, learn from each other, and remind one another that healing is possible. If this story touched you, please subscribe and join our growing family. There are so many more stories to tell, stories of courage, of heartbreak, of hope, and of new beginnings. In the next episode, I'll share how I found joy again in unexpected places and the lessons I wish I'd learned sooner. Don't miss it. Remember, you are stronger than you think, and your story is far from over. Thank you for listening, for sharing, and for being part of this journey with me.